Hi, Scarlet. Thank you for coming. Thank you for this opportunity and for being ready to talk and discuss important subjects. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. My name is Scarlet. I use they, them, or she, her pronouns.
Mhm.
And I'm from the U.S. I grew up in Appalachia, and now I'm in the Midwest right now. So I'm thinking about moving again, but we'll see how that goes.
Do you have any reasons for moving?
Yeah, right now with the political climate and a lot of the chaos that's going on in the U.S., I think we'll feel a little bit safer in
Mm.
a more progressive city.
So the concerns are connected to political situation.
Mostly, yeah, I'd say so.
Mm. Scarlett, and can you tell something about your transition? Because I guess you have a pretty unique experience. In your bio on social media, you wrote, let me read so I will not make a mistake. Butch Transsexual.
Yeah.
Can you tell more about this experience?
Yeah, it's kind of unique because I think a lot of people know what a butch lesbian is.
Yeah.
I consider it mainly just someone who doesn't try to act ladylike, someone who doesn't associate too much with the stereotypes of what it means to be a woman.
Mhm.
But then there's the added complexity of being trans. A lot of trans women feel like they can't be butch because there's this extra pressure to pass and to be maybe like there's something to prove, like you have to be a woman. And I think that there's a lot of pressure to blend in as well too. And it's definitely there's a lot to consider with safety and stuff, but being butch is who I am. It took me years of experimenting to figure that out, but um, I finally felt confident when I cut all my hair off. I felt so much happier, so much less dysphoric. So maybe I stick out more, but it's just who I am.
Can you tell me more about experience before transitioning? How have you explored your gender, your identity?
It took a while. So I grew up in Appalachia. We didn't have a lot of resources on that kind of stuff.
Mm.
On being trans. Nobody really knew what it was, I think. I moved to a big city for college, and funny enough, though, the first trans person I met was from my hometown. So it was when I came back to visit for a little bit, but we talked about it and we talked about what it was like to be trans for her, and I realized that I related to a lot of the stuff she said. Then I came back to the city and met some more trans women, and it didn't take long before I realized I was trans. Before that, though, it was very confusing. I knew that I was different, but I didn't really know how. Like maybe I'm just autistic, maybe I'm bisexual. I questioned my sexuality first. And I came to the conclusion at first that I was bi, like I was a bi cis man, but that immediately felt wrong. I went on a date with a couple of guys and did not like it at all. So then I came out as a woman and thought, okay, I'm probably a bisexual woman. And it honestly, it took about 4 years for me to realize I'm actually just a lesbian. I was right the whole time about who I'm attracted to. Um, but it was definitely, it took a while to figure all that stuff out. And there's still a lot of confusion about attraction and asexuality and stuff that I'm not sure I'll ever fully understand.
Can you tell our audience what does butch means for those who don't know?
Yeah, well, I want to talk a little bit about being non-binary.
Mhm.
The idea that gender is a social construct, we made it up. There's nothing necessarily inherent about gender. Maybe there is some when it comes to sex, but gender is something that we use to navigate the world socially. Um, so non-binary is the idea that there isn't a binary of male and female. You can pick and choose any characteristics that suit you. Really, you can just be yourself, and there's no need to box yourself in too much. And being butch is a great example of not conforming to those standards. I consider myself a woman still, um, but I have a more masculine or androgynous appearance, and I don't feel like I need to confine myself into whatever it means to look and act like a woman. I'm still a woman. I just don't care what people tell me I need to act and look like.
And also, I want to mention the second word in your bio, transsexual. Usually, it's an old word. For some people, it can be even offensive. especially for the younger generation of trans people. Can you tell me more about this word transsexual?
Yeah, I get why it's stigmatized a little bit. I think that we've historically treated trans people as a pathology, and I think that it can be kind of dehumanizing to just be seen as a medical condition. Um, so I understand the hesitance, but the reality is it is medical for me. I take hormones, I've had surgery, I have done hair removal and changed my name legally. Um, I changed my sex. I think that you can be transgender and not transsexual if you come out and present as a woman, but you don't medically transition, and that's fine. You're still trans. But in my case, I'm also transsexual because I changed my sex characteristics. I think that transsexual is just a specific case of transgender, and transsexual is more specific, and that's what describes me the best.
In my previous interview with Danny, with a trans man, we discussed the topic of dysphoria. For a lot of transgender people, it is the main reasons for transitioning. Can you tell about your experience? Have you experienced dysphoria and how it started, how it felt?
Yeah, I have experienced a lot of dysphoria. I didn't realize it was dysphoria. I think a lot of people feel like they can't transition because they say they don't feel dysphoria. And I said that for years, but I was wrong. I was dysphoric the whole time. Really, what dysphoria is feeling like you aren't being seen or you aren't representing yourself in a way that feels the best. You don't have to be super upset all the time or crying all the time or really anything besides wishing you were perceived differently or wishing that you were different. And that's how I felt. Like I was kind of happy before as a guy, but I'm just a lot happier now as a woman. And um, but of course there were difficult situations too, like growing up in middle school and high school. Um, I remember there were a lot of signs that I was a woman the whole time, like playing volleyball with the girls in school. The boys didn't play volleyball, so when we played it in gym class and they said I was pretty good at it, that made me feel great. When I hung out with the girls and I was the only guy, hanging out with them, um, it made me feel better. It made me feel like that's where I was supposed to be, like I was supposed to be having girl time. Um, and that is dysphoria. Maybe I was happy in those moments, but the fact that I wanted that to be who I was fundamentally, that is dysphoria. And by transitioning and by changing my presentation, my name and pronouns, and medically transitioning, that's how I mitigate my dysphoria. And I think that's the case for most trans people.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. And what about social and medical transition? Did they match the period when you started, both of them?
So I came out socially in 2017. I
Mhm.
started to question in the summer of 2017, but I told my friends that I was pretty confident I was somewhere under the trans umbrella, like non-binary maybe in July, I think. But then in October, this is a funny story. I dressed up as a sexy cat for Halloween as a joke. Be like, this is so funny. I'm dressing up as a sexy cat, but I'm not a woman. And then I looked in the mirror and realized how fun it was to wear makeup. I don't even wear makeup anymore, but I looked in the mirror and I was like, oh, this is real. And it's not even that funny. This is just like who I am now. And that was when I accepted it. So I came out in October, November of 2017. I made an appointment to start hormones, and it was like a 5 month wait, I think. So it was April 2018 that I started actually medically transitioning.
And how does it look for non-binary people? Is it the same as for trans women?
It totally can be. It's not always the same. Every single transition is unique. Some people come out socially and then start hormones later. Some people start hormones and don't come out for years or for a couple months. Some people come out to a few people, but not everybody. But I mean, in my case, the truth is, I'll be coming out forever. I'll be coming out to every employer, to every friend that I meet in the future because they'll be knowing that I'm trans. It'll be relevant in a lot of those cases. So it's not something that ends at any point in time. But the specific order of events, I think, really depends, and everybody has different needs.
And if you don't mind, let's discuss the topic of coming out, since you've mentioned it. For example, I will share my experience. Since I became passing, I chose for myself to become stealth in my everyday life
Mhm.
for people who are don't belong to our community. Obviously, for trans people, I present as trans woman and not a woman, trans woman specifically.
Yeah.
What is your opinion on becoming stealth when you're passing?
I don't really try to pass. I know that there is a good reason to try to pass a lot of the time, but it's pretty hard for me to do that, and it's not really a goal of mine. I think that there are times where it's really important that people know that I'm a trans woman, especially with my queer friends. If I'm at a job or if I'm in public, I don't care if people know I'm trans or not. Um, Sometimes I'd like them to know, and sometimes I just think it's not important. I guess so. I never really try to go stealth, but sometimes I don't really care how I'm perceived at all by strangers. I just want to be treated with respect.
But I guess we also have to discuss the topic of safety.
Hmm.
Do you feel safe in public?
Not really, but it depends where I am, I think. I grew up in West Virginia, and people are very friendly there, but social opinions tend to be maybe 20 or 30 years behind the rest of the country. So I feel like I'm maybe at less risk of harm, but I'm also at higher risk of not being understood or maybe being treated in some passive aggressive way. Where I live now in a pretty big city in the Midwest, I feel relatively safe, but you never know how people are going to act. Um, but I'm not sure there's much I could do to feel safer. I could try to pass more, but I find that there's a balance too of how exhausted I am when I try harder and harder to go stealth. And it doesn't really work. I used to have longer hair and I used to wear makeup more. And I swear I get misgendered less now with short hair because I think being butch just is me. Um, but I do want to move to an even larger city that's more progressive. And I think that, a place like that, people might mind their business more or at least be more understanding.
Currently, I live, let's say, not in a very LGBT friendly country. So, in my case, first of all, it's my gender expression, and also it's about safety. It's much safer because I had one instance of being harassed in public because I was cloaked, I was identified as trans. Have you ever experienced?
I have a handful of times. Um, I've been clocked in ways that I consider um, possibly malicious, and then in other ways that I think were just awkward interactions. But um, yeah, I've been harassed before, and I've had friends who were harmed before. Um, it is definitely a safety thing, and I understand too if you're at much higher physical risk, especially like you want to keep yourself safe. Um, but yeah, I've been verbally harassed a couple times, and I've had people in public just come up to me and say, "Hey, are you trans?" And I would either say, "Yeah," like why are you asking, or I would say, "Don't worry about it." Sometimes it's not relevant. There's one time somebody came up to me and asked if I was trans, and I said, "Yeah," and they said, "Oh, that's cool." And I said something like, "Yeah, we can identify each other pretty easily," hinting that I clocked them as trans too, but they didn't tell me that they were. I think it made them very uncomfortable and scared, but kind of give them a taste of their own medicine. Like, don't do that to people. Don't make assumptions. It's very uncomfortable, and it is a safety concern. I don't want someone to ask me if I'm trans in public.
Yeah, I fully agree. And I guess all of trans people will have this eye on clogging other trans people.
Mhm.
Or,
Yeah, we know what to look out for. I can tell when someone else is trans. But instead of saying, "Hey, you're trans just like me," I'll just look at them and maybe I'll give them a look, or maybe I'll just say, "I like your hair." That's a pretty good indicator, I think.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a queer culture thing for sure.
Also, recently I had a discussion with a woman, and we are discussing also the topic of passing. We came to a conclusion, and we agreed that passing doesn't mean being unclockable. So you can present publicly and even be stealth and pass fully, but you still can notice some signs. Like, for example, for trans women, Adam's apple or big feet or hands, something like that. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. I think I've heard of plenty of instances where people are clocked, but still perceived as a woman. And maybe in a lot of cases, people are just cool, like they can identify a trans woman, but they believe that trans women are women, which is true. So it's not actually that they don't pass, they just get identified as trans.
But I guess you've also met such people in our community that get offended because of being misgendered or being clocked.
Hmm. Yeah.
What is your opinion? Can it be offensive?
I think it is. I think that it's dehumanizing in a way. A lot
Mhm.
of cis people might not understand that it really cuts pretty deep because it's traumatic being trans and not being able to transition when you want to, or to live and grow up in a way that doesn't align with how you feel. Maybe a cis person would think it wouldn't hurt that much to be called the wrong pronouns a couple times, but it really does hurt when you don't get to live your life in accordance with how you want to live it for decades. It's pretty tough. So being misgendered is a reminder of that for us because it's been so tough for a long time for a lot of us. I think it's offensive. I don't always get offended, but sometimes I do.
I'm a strong advocate for finding a meeting point with other people who don't belong to our community. And since we're a minority, we don't have any, let's say, political weight or societal weight.
Hmm.
There's less than 1% of people who identify as trans, and I guess even less who actually transitioned. How we can find this meeting point, since for other people, the world is strictly binary, there are only men and women. How we can tell them, and where can this meeting point be, in your opinion?
That's a really good question. I've spent a lot of time thinking about that, and I don't know if there's a great example or a great solution, but I think that it depends on the way society is structured. Ideally, we could have some system in place that can represent us and have our needs be met. And I know that there's been a lot of controversy about trans rights, and one of the most common uh, counters to trans rights that I've heard is we have the same rights as cis people. We have access to the same stuff, but we don't need the same stuff. I don't want the same healthcare because I need different healthcare. Cis people don't have to change their gender marker on documents, but we want to and we should be able to easily. So it's not about trans rights, it's about trans liberation. We need to be able to live how we need to live. I don't know how we achieve that. I think that ideally we can have representation and we can have people that listen to us or we can have weight in legislation. Um, I would like the idea of some sort of democracy that has representation for marginalized groups. Because sure, we're 1%, but it doesn't mean we should have 1% of the decision in what affects our lives when the 99% shouldn't be concerned at all.
And what do you think the topic of trans people became the number one topic of, especially for new administration?
Yeah, it's very unfortunate. I think that fascist regimes throughout history have needed a scapegoat so that they can distract people from what they want to do. And by creating manufactured outrage about a group of people, they can be mad at us instead of mad at the true enemy, which is the people who's trying to control everybody. So I think they chose trans people because it's easy to make up lies about us. We're kind of enigmatic. People don't really know what we want and who we are, and it's been controversial for a long time. So it's easy to make up these outlandish lies about who we are and how we want to cause harm to people. Um, and other people, other common people, working people take the bait and they hate us. And it's a common military tactic. It has been for thousands of years, divide and conquer, split up the common people and make them fight each other, or split up. It's split up the common people and chip away at them one group at a time. But we're fighting each other instead in the culture war. The ruling class doesn't have to lift a finger, and they can just watch us whittle away at each other while we're already worked to death and we don't have time to advocate for ourselves. It's really unfortunate.
I like that you've mentioned the word hate. They hate us. What do you think the reason for that hatred? Because it's a pretty strong word to hate someone.
Yeah, I think that they wouldn't hate us if they weren't fed a bunch of propaganda, but I think that um, the reason they hate us is because um, the ruling class wants them to hate us, and it's because being trans is proof that we have power to be who we are. We can liberate ourselves. We don't have to follow all the rules. We can change our gender. That's pretty huge. That's magical in a way. Like we can really be who we want to be. We have a lot of power to change ourselves in the world, and that power is a threat to the people who want to hoard the wealth and the people who want to make all the rules about how we can live our life. So they want to stop us from having that influence, from convincing people that we have power in the world. They want people to be afraid to liberate themselves and to feel powerless, but we're proof that you don't have to be powerless.
How should our community behave in this situation when we
I
feel
think
this hatred?
that's a good question. I think the best thing we can do is to persevere and to do the best we can to be ourselves. I'm not going back in the closet.
Mhm.
I'll, who knows how much harm and how much danger I'll be in by doing that, but um, I would rather fight to my death, like death before detransition is something I hear a lot of people say, and I believe that. Um, if people hate me, then I'll love myself even more so that I can be who I am.
I noticed that this tendency in our community that a lot of trans people, especially influencers, they become more aggressive. Do you think it is the right way for our community to move?
I don't know. I think that people are entitled to their own perceptions and opinions and what they think the best approach is, and we're supposed to disagree. My approach has always been to be kind of respectable in how I approach it, but I understand also the pitfalls of respectability politics. I shouldn't have to go out of my way and work so much harder to convince people to like us, but it's just a strategy that in certain cases works and in certain cases it doesn't work. I'd rather spend a lot of energy educating people, but I understand being angry too. And I think that a lot of people don't want to learn about us. They don't want us to exist. They um, want to see us stop existing no matter what. And anybody who engages in bad faith and that kind of stuff, I think it's fine to be angry at them. I think it's more productive to love our community and to build something together and build some interdependence among ourselves. I try not to spend time arguing with people or being angry about things, or if I am angry, I let it motivate me to do something good for somebody who needs it.
In my opinion, I guess aggression is not the right way, since we're the minority. We can't do anything about it. But probably the lack of knowledge. It is the main reason of the hatred for trans people. So maybe we should work with that. Maybe to give some lectures, to talk about ourselves, to record such interviews as we're doing right now. What do you think about it?
I think that it's very important. I think it has a place. I think that there are times where it's a good idea and times where it might not be a good idea. I think that one of the reasons it's easier to make us be the number one target right now is because there's been a lot of awareness recently and it hasn't been ingrained in society. So there's a lot of stuff to latch on to hate us by. I think that if people wanted to learn about us and used it to actually um, accept us, then awareness is good. I think that awareness is still good. Um, but I think that we also have to be careful about what we say because of the danger with giving people who want to hurt us too much information about us. Um, I think awareness is good. I think we also have to protect ourselves. I'm not sure what the balance is. I think in this case, like, I hope that people who watch this interview um, learn about what it's like. And I think a lot of people who watch this will probably resonate with a lot of the stuff we say. So I think that's very good and productive. But I think if this was aired only to Republican lawmakers, that might be a bad opportunity because I'm revealing a lot of vulnerable stuff about myself.
And mind, we'll go back to our first topic about your own experience. Transitioning always is related to coming out, especially to our closest people. Can you tell about your experience, how you came out to your relatives, friends, colleagues?
I came out to my friends first, and living in a progressive city, being in university at the time, they were supportive. Some people didn't get it, but they accepted it. And naturally, people come and go. Half of my friends stuck around and half of them didn't, but that might have happened either way. And you get new friends over time. I find that I've my old friends have been replaced by friends who understand me more and vice versa, so that's good. With my family, I told my mom first. Um, and her first reaction was kind of to dismiss it. And I think that in retrospect, she was afraid, and she might have subconsciously had this idea that if she doesn't acknowledge it, that it will go away. Um, but I think she was mostly just afraid of the implications of me coming out and being a woman. I think it scared her, and she wasn't ready to address it because I told her out of nowhere. But a couple months later, I brought it up again, and she told me that um, I have her full support. And she's been very supportive, of course, this whole time. She calls me by the correct name. She did pretty much right away, the correct pronouns. She's been great. She was a little scared for me, but I know she's probably my number one supporter right now. Um, my dad, the first time I told him after my mom by a couple months. I wasn't sure how he'd react. Um, And so this is the way I came out to my dad. They came up to visit my mom and dad. I got my dad a pack of beer. It was his favorite beer, and he couldn't get it in his hometown. And I wrote a letter and stuck it in the 4 pack. And when we were done hanging out, getting dinner, I said, I got some of the beer that you like, and I also wrote a letter for you. And he said, okay, should I read it now? And I said, no, don't wait till you get home, please. Because it was a couple-hour drive. So he read it when he got home, and his reaction was thanks for telling me. This is really good to know, and I want you to know that you can feel safe telling me these things. I have a lot of questions, so let's talk about this soon. So the next day we talked on the phone for I think 2 or 3 hours, and I answered all of his questions. Some were really good questions. What did it mean about my future? How was I going to transition? Maybe some personal questions. Um, but he asked really good questions. He also asked some really silly questions like, are you still going to like the same music? And are you still going to, pursue the same career and that kind of stuff? Some of them were good questions, some were very silly, but he got it all out of his system. He understood, and he was a big supporter too. Um, he didn't always get my name and pronouns right for a couple years. It was about 50-50 for a while, but then he got it, and he even his politics changed. My brother's politics changed. One of them was kind of acted a lot more socially conservative, but he's so progressive now. I think that just having me in his life, he gets it more. The only people who I think had a bad reaction were my grandparents. It really upset them. They didn't want to accept it. They tried to change my mind, which obviously didn't work. And I didn't really talk to them that much for a few years, but they have clearly put in more effort to try to understand, and they may not always get my name or pronouns right going forward, but I do think they're pretty supportive, and I don't want to cut them out of my life. And I know a lot of people don't have that privilege. A lot of people do lose their family, so maybe most trans people lose family members support. So it sucks. Like I'm happy, I'm privileged to an extent, but it's not easy.
So your experience in general is pretty positive with your family.
I think so. It was a lot better for me than most of my friends, and I don't want to complain about it. I feel pretty loved, and I've always had a good support system.
Maybe you can share some tips or tricks how to come out to your family
I
or how to
think
prepare them.
I think you have to do it in a loving way. I think that the way I phrased my letter to my dad, well, to both my parents, even though my mom already knew, was I want to do this for myself. It's what really, it's what I need for my well-being. And I know it's tough. It's a controversial thing, but this isn't something I can negotiate on. This is just who I am. And I hope that you will support me, that kind of attitude. Like, this is what I need. Um, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. I do think it's important to offer. to do some of that extra emotional labor, even though it shouldn't be our job to do it. I wish people could look up stuff and get answers so that I didn't have to spend so much energy on it. But I want them to have the right answers, and I want them to ask me about things so that they don't look something up and maybe it's phrased poorly. Maybe they get taught some misinformation because there's a lot of misinformation out there. So it's exhausting, but I'd rather answer the question. So I offered that when I came out. I said, I'm happy to help you understand this and make it not seem like such a scary thing.
But before you came out to them, were they aware of trans people?
Yeah, I think they probably didn't understand it fully. My dad had probably never met a trans person and didn't really know what it was. And my mom, since I came out, has sort of explored more on her queer side too. She's bisexual. She's never dated a woman, but I think her seeing me come out empowered her in a lot of ways. So she got it. I think she got it more over time. But um, yeah, I think that they probably still, when I came out, neither of them really knew what to expect. They noticed that I started wearing more feminine or androgynous outfits, and I painted my nails and grew my hair out, which doesn't suit me anymore, really. But I was experimenting. They noticed, but they didn't know why I was doing it or really think anything of it until I came out. But it honestly, it might have made it easier for them to accept it or to see it coming at least.
And also, you've said you got contacts with your old friends, with some of them. What was the reason?
Um, some of my old friends um didn't really understand. I think they maybe just ignored it or dismissed it. Some people never really switched my pronouns or my name, so naturally I'm not gonna vibe well in those situations, so I got rid of some people. Um, and some people were supportive, but pretty indifferent, or maybe we just realized we didn't have as many common interests as we thought we did. So we're good acquaintances. We could probably have a conversation, but we just didn't hang out anymore. And other friends I got closer to because they knew more about me and they supported me. Maybe like some of my queer friends realized that I've been queer this whole time and now we have more in common than we thought we did.
And I'm also curious about your opinion. Should we try our best to change our friends' and families' minds, to
I
force
don't
them to accept us?
I don't want to waste my energy doing that. I think that I'm happy to help answer their questions, but if their mind is going to be changed, then it's because they want to change their mind. They want to learn. If they don't want to learn, I'm not going to force any information on them. I wish they would ask questions. I wish they would want to learn, but if they don't, then there's nothing I can do. Like I've wanted to help my friends through situations before, but if they don't want help, there's nothing I can do. Same thing with accepting who I am. If someone is going to accept me, then it'll be their choice, not mine.
Scarlett, on your social media, you share your experience of struggles with mental health. Can you tell our audience about it, about your experience and journey?
Yeah, there's a lot to say about that, I think. Um, I'll start with some more fundamental things to who I am, like autism and ADHD. Those are things that I'm born with or things that are like ADHD destined to develop as a teenager or young adult. Um, those make me who I am. Definitely there are some difficulties that come with that. Um, fundamentally, I consider it a difference, and not really like an illness. It's not a mental illness. It is a disability, though, but there's nothing wrong with the disability. I think a lot of people are afraid to call autism a disability, but it is. Like, I have a hard time reading body language. I have a hard time fitting in. There are certain things that I really struggle with, like the fact a loud noise could happen and I have to stay home for the rest of the day. Like, that kind of sucks. That is a disability. But there's more as well. Um, and a lot of this I didn't realize until after I came out. I'm also bipolar. Um, that's something that tends to develop in people's early 20s. It was in my case. Um, bipolar is tough. I have bipolar type 2, so I have kind of mild hypomanic phases and then really long, intense depressive phases. As soon as I got diagnosed with that, I started medication, and I've been in remission since then, since 2019. Although my meds are now suddenly not working as well as they used to, and that's pretty normal. But I'm going through that right now. The thing that is This threw me off at first. I also developed BPD, borderline personality disorder. Um, or maybe I had it, but I didn't. It didn't become apparent until around 2019, 2020. I was 23 years old or so. Um, and I was wondering why I was having mood swings all the time. I was angry. I was having a hard time in relationships. I would get triggered all the time by friends and in relationships. And I thought I came out like I'm living who I am. I should be happy right now. Why is it getting worse? And it took a little while to accept that sometimes things have to get better before you can address difficult things. I think that a lot of my relationship trauma and social difficulties were buried until then. And I was finally in a safe enough space to where I could address those things, my trauma and all that stuff. So I developed BPD, I got diagnosed, and it's been a lot of work in therapy and learning good coping mechanisms and learning to love myself through loving other people in relationships. And it technically was in remission a couple of years ago now, because I've put in a lot of work, but there's still things that bring it back up. I'm in two relationships right now. The newer one um, is it's new, it's exciting, it's scary. It takes time to develop authentic love and connection, and in the meantime, there's a lot of volatility, and it's especially hard for me. I thought I was done with BPD, but it can be triggered again. It comes back. It's easier this time. I have my coping mechanisms and stuff I've learned, and I can stay self-aware, but it's going to be hard for a long time, I think, and I'm still grappling with that. Um, those are the main things. I also realized I have OSDD, which is the dissociative disorder, similar to dissociative identity disorder, DID. Um, but it's a little bit there. There's less diagnostic criteria that you have to meet for OSDD. So, like, I have multiple people in my head, but we don't have amnesia between each other. So, that's tough. A lot of people don't know anything about that. It's a very stigmatized disorder. Um, and I think a lot of people that have it will never realize that they have it. It's a covert disorder. So I'm, oh,
If
go ahead.
you want, can you tell our audience more about it?
Yeah, OSDD, in my case, looks like me getting maybe more triggered than you would think I would get from a situation. And sometimes it could be nothing at all seems to trigger me, but I start dissociating. I dissociate a lot. Um, I think some people are more predisposed to dissociation as a coping mechanism to fear for safety. Um, and I dissociate a lot. It's a complex form of PTSD. So something must have happened when I was really young. I don't know what it is, and that's a good thing. I don't need to know what it is. It's just who I am. Um, but I dissociate. Um, One of the body's coping mechanisms for something really bad happening when you're really young is to say, that didn't happen to me, that happened to somebody else. And then you form another somebody else inside your own mind that happened to. They hold the trauma, but I don't. Um, and every time something really big happens, it might make another person in my head, another headmate, another alter, some people call them. Um, I have maybe 10 or 15 headmates. I'm the one who goes through the world like 99% of the time. I'm the one who's fronting, that's what they call it. Um, I front most of the time, but I have headmates that take care of things when I get stressed out, when I dissociate. Um, it is a disorder. It makes things really hard. I don't want to dissociate all the time. It's very distressing sometimes, but I live a pretty functional life with that, and I don't think it's a big burden for me. I don't like dissociating, and it is a form of PTSD, but I don't want to be anything but plural. I don't want to just be one person. I like being multiple, and I function pretty well with it, all things considered. So that's just kind of who I am, who we are. Um, but the other stuff is the real challenge. Like BPD is a challenge. The bipolar relapse is frustrating. It's a challenge, but I like being autistic. I like being plural. I wouldn't even want to not have PTSD as much as it sounds crazy to say it, but it's who I am. I wouldn't be the same person if I didn't have it.
Really love how you openly and freely talk about such topics. Usually, mental health is ostracized. For a lot of people, it's a normal thing to share about their experience of going to a cardiologist, for example, or any other doctor. But people rarely talk about visiting a psychiatrist or clinical psychologist. But you do it openly and freely.
Mhm.
How do you think we can break this stigma of mental health issues?
I think it's important to understand why it happens. And I don't totally understand it. I think that when people go to the eye doctor, the heart doctor, or any other thing for a medical condition, people see that as something that happens to them. They're an innocent victim. Nobody asked to have these disorders. Like so many people have astigmatism. I have glasses. Like that's normal. People have heart problems. It's very common. Um, and cancer, like that's an awful devastating thing. No one asks to develop cancer, and so people have a lot of sympathy for that. But people don't have sympathy for people with mental illnesses, because I don't know. I think they think it's our fault. They think it's my fault that I act like this because sometimes I'm hurtful to people. I've done a lot better in recent years. I've put in a lot of effort, but I'm not trying to ever hurt people. I think it happens because I feel unsafe. It's not a conscious choice. Um, but I understand like being afraid of borderline people because I've been abusive before. Other people have been abusive before. I I do it because I get scared and I don't know what I need to do to keep myself safe, so I freak out. Um, I like to think I'm not really abusive anymore. I think we've all been mean sometimes, and I'm only doing my best. It's scary. It's like I'm set on fire every time something scares me. I am panicking and trying to put out the fire, but I think if other people felt like this, they would react the same way. It's intimidating. Um, it's hardly in my control in those moments, but I can only do my best to try to fix it. So I get stigmatizing certain things that it makes sense. I wish it wasn't like that. I wish people had more compassion. I think it'd be easier to heal from our trauma if people were compassionate and wanted to work with us and understand how they can help us through these situations. I would have had a lot less issues if people had sought to understand and ask questions to really know why this happens, what happened to me, or what they can do to help fix this stuff. But it's hard to even talk about this. It's hard to have my thoughts organized about this. It's a tricky subject, but there's also stigma for stuff like bipolar. And that is something that I think happens to people. It happened to me. I didn't do anything that triggered being bipolar. My brothers are both bipolar. My grandmother probably. I don't know if she ever got diagnosed, but it's genetic. I think that people are afraid of mental illnesses because it's abstract. Um, we don't I think the average person doesn't know how to explain it. They're afraid it could happen to them. I think people are afraid of being disabled in general. Um, and I think a lot of people, I think everybody has issues. I think everybody struggles. Everybody has trauma. And everybody can be a little mean sometimes. And to find somebody who's struggling a little bit more, they can distract themselves from their own problems. They can say, I'm not bad. Look at them. They're worse than I am. So they can avoid accountability by blaming someone who has it worse. Um, I think that people are afraid of emotions, and I think that's partly where that comes from.
Can we expand the topic of bipolar? A lot of people are afraid of this word. It's scary. Can you tell about your experience and should other people be afraid of it?
No, honestly, I think that um, being bipolar is tough for me. It can be tough for loved ones too, but I don't think it's scary. Maybe that's just from my experience, but people aren't really afraid of people who are depressed, and 90% of me being bipolar is me being depressed. 10% me being hypomanic, or maybe if you have bipolar one, you're manic. But I think the most productive thing you can do is recognize it and treat it as soon as possible. And if people are afraid of these things, it's going to get ignored, it's going to get buried, and there's going to be so much fear of, like, if you have bipolar, you might be afraid of yourself. And I think that is one of the worst approaches. I think that it's essential to pay attention to who you are, to be insightful, and to do what you can to make your circumstances better. So if you have mental health issues, if you are bipolar or anything like that, accept it, like, learn about yourself, do what you can to understand it, um, and seek treatment like immediately, please. Like, it is a lifesaver for a lot of people. My bipolar meds, my mood stabilizer definitely saved my life 10 times over from all the episodes I didn't have. Um, and it's a lifelong thing. Some people don't become fully regulated. I actually was for 5 years. So it's great. I was stable, kind of unstable now, but I up my dose. We'll see what happens. Um, Bipolar is just another mood disorder like depression, but with another side to it, mania or hypomania. Um, yeah, I think the less we fear it, the more we understand it, the easier it is to address it and to live a good quality life.
And what about transition? Has it impacted your mental health?
Yeah, I think I might have mentioned this earlier, but with coming out, it made things better for me. I felt a lot better. I felt safer, and then things got way worse. I developed BPD. I developed more emotional dysregulation problems. It was a lot harder. A lot of my trauma came back up like little bite-sized pieces. And the reason it does that is because if I didn't come out, it would have been buried forever. I would have had much worse problems and I wouldn't have had any clue what they were. But after coming out, I felt so good that I could finally feel bad and move on from the feeling bad. So the trauma comes back up. Um, and it's important to address it and release it to heal from it if you can. And do your best to figure out why it's there and learn how to live with it. You can't actually fully heal it and make it go away. Like, I'm always going to have problems, but what I can do is learn to accept that I am the way I am, learn to take the power away of some of those triggers, um, and learn skills that make me able to have a good quality life. And I've made a lot of progress already, and hopefully can make so much more progress in the future. So yeah, coming out as trans made it easier for a year or two, and then it became so much harder. But it's because I have a lot more work to do. I'm not done yet. Um, and every time I release some of that pain, I become a happier person. And it'll be like that for probably the rest of my life.
I really like your phrase, I have to learn to accept who I am.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I really hope everyone in our community will remember it.
Yeah. I mean, if you can accept that you're trans, I think that's a big step. Like, I accept I'm trans. That's a hard thing to accept for some people. And if you can accept you're trans, you could accept that you have certain interests, you have certain mental health problems, you have all these other things. It's a lot easier for me to accept that I have trauma, and a lot of it makes sense because I'm trans. It's a traumatic thing in a lot of cases. Um, but yeah, like, if I can accept that I'm trans, I can accept that I have um, some trauma. It is pretty common, I think, and um, I think, I don't know, if I've paved the way to be who I am, I might as well be who I am as much as possible.
And talking about acceptance, uh, in our community, I guess it's a pretty big issue. Um, a lot of people can't accept they're trans, and some they even try to pretend of being not trans. For example, recently on TikTok, I watched a video. There was a trans woman claiming that she has PCOS. So she assumed that she had ovaries. In other case, trans women assume that they have menstruation. What is your opinion?
It really depends on people's anatomy. I mean, maybe they're intersex. I don't know. It's hard to say. I actually do have PMS. I don't have a uterus or ovaries, but I get
Yeah,
cramps, I get bloated, but I think that's pretty common. Not everybody experiences that. I don't really get the mood swings and stuff with PMS. I just have really bad bloating for a couple of days once a month. Um, yeah, I mean, accepting it and being real and grounded with what you're experiencing, and um, I think it's hard. I think it's a very scary thing, and it's hard not to have distorted perceptions about who you are because true acceptance is a very big thing. You're taking a huge bite out of something, and maybe it helps to break it up into smaller pieces. But um, I what I try to do is to learn a little about myself at a time, and maybe I try to understand something and I'm heading in the wrong direction, but um, it's at least one step more closer to understanding who I am. Yeah, it's a really complicated thing.
Did you have any milestones on your path to accepting yourself? I'll give you one example. For me, during first several months, I was highly focused on becoming passing. I've invested almost all of my savings, a lot of time, just on the way how I look. Only when I managed to do it, I finally accepted, yeah, I'm trans and I'm proud of it. I still can live a full life. I can be successful. I can work. I can help other people. And did you have any milestones?
I think
Like,
I did. I think that ties back a little bit into acceptance too. Like, I needed to test some things to make sure that I was really trans. I tried makeup. I kind of overshot it a little bit, I think. I presented very feminine before I started hormones. And in retrospect, that made me dysphoric too. Especially with like still some facial hair shadow and that kind of stuff. It's hard for me to look at pictures from that era. But I needed to know that being overly feminine was also uncomfortable for me. So it was important that I discovered that and then dialed it back a little bit. It was important that I tried different kinds of outfits and different presentations and uh, changed certain features in myself to become who I really am. Like suppressing testosterone was really important, more important than I thought. I was on hormones for a year and a half before I got an orchiectomy. And I didn't realize that when my testosterone dropped that much after the orchie that I would feel that much better. I thought I already have estrogen, I'm not going to feel that different, but I feel so much better after that. My testosterone was extremely high though, by the way. It was ridiculously high even after being on hormones for a while. So it was a big difference. Um, that's definitely probably my largest milestone. I think coming out is a big one. Um, And it's pretty common to do little baby steps. Like I thought maybe I'm non-binary, maybe I'm gender non-conforming, maybe I'm a woman, maybe I'm gender fluid. But over time, I realized no, I'm absolutely a woman. I'm a lesbian. There's no in between. I don't need to take these baby steps. But it was important that I did because it let me prove it to myself. It let me try every step along the way to make sure I'm making the right choice. And there's no need to rush into things. I think it's important to experiment and determine what you don't like and what doesn't feel good as much as what does feel good.
since you mentioned you're a lesbian, let's talk about relationship.
Yeah.
Uh, can you tell your story? Are you dating someone? Are you single?
Yeah, I have two partners. I'm polyamorous. And I feel like that comes with a lot of stigma too, but I love talking about it, honestly. I've been dating my partner who I live with now for about 3 years. We actually just had an anniversary this month. So,
Oh,
yeah,
congratulations.
we've been together for 3 years. We met on a dating app. Um, both polyamorous. We knew that when we met. That's an important compatibility thing, definitely. So we hit it off. We have a lot in common. We're both trans women. We're both autistic. We're both lesbians. And at this point, I could hardly see myself dating somebody who's not an autistic trans woman. It's pretty fundamental, I think, for me for compatibility. If someone's not autistic, I think we're not going to really understand each other. If someone's not a trans woman, maybe I could date a cis woman, but I feel like the odds are a lot lower. I'm open to the idea, but not seeking it or anything right now. I have another partner too. We've been dating for 2.5 months or so, talking a little bit before that, and I actually met her through my long-term partner. They were friends for a few years. She came over to hang out with my partner, and that was how I met her. And we started messaging each other. And we're in a long distance relationship. We live about 3 hour drive away, but we hang out once a month in person and go on vacations. We've explored different cities together, and it's been a lot of fun. We're polyamorous too. She's an autistic trans woman, so all fundamental things to me in relationships.
Scarlett, can you share experience of being polyamorous? How have you explored it, and how does it work in reality?
I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about it. The way that I learned about it was in a philosophy class I took in college. I was in a class called The Philosophy of Sex and Love. And I took a bunch of philosophy classes. I was a philosophy minor, which doesn't really mean anything in retrospect besides I took extra classes, but I had a lot of fun with it. The professor actually wrote an article that said why monogamy is the best way to maximize happiness in relationships. And I remember reading that and thinking, this is dumb. I don't agree at all. and, uh, and not that there's anything wrong with monogamy. I think that if you're monogamous, that's great. I'm just not. Um, I'm polyamorous. I realized it right then. I did not resonate with what the article said, although most people did. Um, so from that moment, I said, I'm polyamorous. I even knew that I had clues before that. I wanted to be in an open relationship with my high school girlfriend while we were long distance. I said, if you want to date other people, that's fine. She said, I don't want to do that. But I was okay with it already. And when I was like 18. Um, but yeah, I was probably 20 when I really understood it and accepted it and knew that it had a word. Um, but yeah, so I've been dating my partner for 3 years. We're both polyamorous. People think that polyamorous people don't feel jealousy, and that's not true. I've been jealous many times. I've been envious too when my partner has other people that she hooks up with or dates, and when I don't have other people, I feel like, why can't I have this? It's a common thing. I think being polyamorous forces you to confront things that monogamous people should confront, but they don't absolutely have to. I think that there are a lot of things that really successful monogamous relationships do where they confront these things. But if you're polyamorous, you have no choice but to address difficult things and to communicate very clearly about certain things. Um, it includes navigating jealousy, talking about finances and logistics and scheduling and having other people in your life. But it's just like having multiple friends, having multiple partners means that I have multiple people I love, and multiple people I'm willing to share my life with. But I share my life with my friends and with my cat and with family. It's the same thing. It's just that there's romance involved with more than one person. There's sex maybe involved with more than one person. Um, I think that overall it's about the same uh, type of things you go through with monogamy, but with unique contexts.
How to cope with jealousy?
I think you have to do a lot of work on yourself if you feel jealousy. I was always the jealous one in this relationship, not my partner. Um, and I didn't think I was a jealous person until I dated her, but um, it turns out I am sometimes. I realize that my jealousy comes from insecurity of myself. I'm not mad that she's with other people. I'm mad that I'm not with other people because there must be something wrong with me, but there's not. I have to accept that I sometimes have low self-esteem, and fundamentally I need to learn to love myself and have other people support me through it. And it's not about making myself not jealous, it's about making myself see my own worth.
And did transition impact your sexual identity somehow? For me, it did. My sexual identity changed.
Did it?
What about you?
It kind of did. I mean, I experimented with dating guys for a little while. I thought maybe I was bi, but I'm not. I think that it is a Kickstarter, though. If you can question your gender, you can definitely question your sexual orientation, and people learn more about themselves. And I think that when you change your hormones in your endocrine system, that you start to have different desires and different things feel good. I think that's pretty normal. Although in reality, I was always attracted to women and only women. And if you have the right endocrine system, if you're non-binary, there's a chance that we're compatible, but it depends on the non-binary person, of course. But the thing I learned about myself is that I don't feel attraction very often. Um, some people say that I'm demisexual, but I don't think that's a good word. I'm somewhere on the asexual spectrum, maybe, but I don't know because I've tried dating so many times, and there are people that I like that I want to be good friends with, and I'll have sex with them, but I'm not actually attracted to them, and I don't really enjoy the physical intimacy. And that's frustrating because I have a very high sex drive. So the fact that I want to be with people, but I hardly ever find people I actually want to be with, that's been very frustrating for a long time. And I don't know if it was like that before I came out, before I realized I was trans. I think I was too dysphoric to really even know what I was feeling. Um, but now, like, whenever I do feel attraction for somebody, it feels huge because it only happens once a year or once every other year that I find somebody that I really like and want to connect with and want to have sex with. Um, so it feels like a big deal, and I want to explore that. And there have been times where I've been rejected or the feelings aren't reciprocated, and that's tough. But it's especially tough, I think, because that opportunity only comes up once a year at the most, and I just have to wait and wish that I was with somebody, but I'm not. But it's been easier since I've been with my partner long term. I at least have a good support system, romance and stuff, and now I have a second partner. And it's a lot easier to feel loved, I think, when you have a good support system. And it doesn't always have to be partners, friends and family count too. But I do feel like my needs are being met a lot more since I've persevered and been very patient in exploring dating and relationships.
Are there any tips on dating for trans women?
I'm sure there are. I don't know. I only really date other trans women. And I think I can talk from the perspective of a lesbian. I think it
Hmm?
tends to be very romanticized when you date other women. It's easy to see it as the most amazing thing that's ever happened in the world. It's easy to romanticize it. Um, Infatuation is good. It's important. It's fun. Being in the honeymoon phase of a relationship is important, but you have to put in the work so that you can build an authentic connection. I think a lot of people love the honeymoon phase, but they don't realize it's temporary or they don't want it to be temporary. The reason it feels so good is so that you can be more motivated to really learn about each other and want to know each other and fall in love. And if you use the honeymoon phase as just a hormone addiction and that's about it, then it can be a lot harder to build that authentic connection. There's, of course, all the stereotypes about moving in together after a week. I think people should be very intentional about the choices they make. And that doesn't mean you have to wait a year or two to move in together. But I think people should um, keep themselves grounded in reality. Like enjoy the highs of the honeymoon phase and infatuation, but um, make sure the person's really good. Don't ignore red flags if there are any, and discuss things. If you feel a certain way, then if it's a negative feeling, then say it and try to release it in some way. I have intrusive thoughts sometimes that tell me I should be angry or I should be upset or I should be scared. The best thing I can do is say, hey, I have this irrational thought. I just want to tell you about it. I want to take its power away. And when I tell my partners about those thoughts, then it doesn't have control over me anymore. I didn't realize I could do that for a long time, but it's important to share those thoughts.
And are there any specific in lesbian relationships?
What do you mean?
Are they different somehow from heterosexual?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, no relationship can be easily categorized by how it feels, but I think that there is something about lesbian relationships because in all my cases at least, like we have high estrogen and I think that affects how we feel and how we think about things and um I think that we can empathize with each other because we have similar experiences and similar perceptions about the world, and have similar life experiences. And a really important thing to note, I think, is that when I'm in a relationship with another woman, especially another autistic trans woman, we have so much in common already. Even people I just met, that's a very intimate experience being with another autistic trans lesbian. We have so many similar experiences, and we know it before we even talk. We realize that we have an intimate connection, it makes it a lot easier to fall in love. And I think that's true for cis lesbians too, to an extent. Um, it's a hard world for us, and the fact that we are trans women, the fact that we are autistic trans lesbians, we understand a lot about each other without having said a single word to each other. So it makes connecting easier. It's an intimate experience, but we don't know everything about each other. So I think that it's important to, and there's no rule book for how to have a relationship, especially a queer relationship. So you have to find what works for you and ask more questions and be more intentional in your communication to really develop something productive and good for each other.
And what about your family? Have they accepted your relationship?
Yeah, I was a little hesitant to say I was polyamorous because of stigma that comes with that, but my family doesn't really think anything of it. They think it's fine. And being a lesbian, I feel like if they accepted I was trans, it would make perfect sense to accept I'm a lesbian. And in fact, I think my grandparents would rather me be a lesbian than a straight woman because it's always been easier for me to accept, for them to accept that I date women. Um, so it's kind of funny how that works when you switch genders, that it's almost easier to accept that your kid is gay instead of straight. But that has been my experience.
While I was preparing for the interview, I read several posts on your Instagram, and one of them, I'll read it. Being horny and not wanting to fuck is tedious and frustrating.
Yeah, it is very much so.
This post was related about your experience of being asexual. Can you tell me more? What is asexuality and what does it mean for you?
Asexual can mean a lot of different things, and I still don't know what it means for me. I don't know where I fall on the asexual spectrum, but I even learned this recently. I thought that asexual meant you had a low sex drive or you didn't feel sexual attraction or something, but all it really means is you don't feel sexual attraction. If you're like purely asexual, you're not sexually attracted to people. And some people feel that for sex and romance. Some people feel it just for sex but not romance. Some people feel it just for romance but not sex. Um, I have a very high sex drive and a very high drive for romance too. Um, so being asexual or somewhere on the asexual spectrum is tricky because I want to have a lot of sex, but there's no one, and a lot of the time in my life, like there's been no one that I've wanted to do it with. And I wish that I had somebody that I wanted to do it with. There are plenty of people I could have sex with. I could get on dating apps and hook up places and find people, but I just wouldn't enjoy it. I don't want to have sex for the sake of having sex. I want to really connect with somebody and express some sort of creative outlet or passion with somebody. And if I don't have somebody for that, then it wouldn't matter if I was having sex. It wouldn't be an outlet for that. Um, I very rarely feel attraction for people, so when I do feel attraction, it feels like a really big deal. But I do feel attraction for some people. It's just rare, I think.
And what about the sex drive? Has it changed since you've transitioned?
Yeah, I think it fluctuates a lot. I think before I used to have more lust or maybe even more shame about how I felt about it because of the gender dysphoria, maybe. But um, now I feel more confident in who I am. Um, Sometimes I have a very high sex drive. Sometimes I feel more euphoric and happier because I can have sex the way I want to and feel like who I am. Um, but then there are times where it drops a lot. It does fluctuate a lot. There have been times where I have no sex drive whatsoever for months in a row. Lately, it's been pretty normal. I think from the summer to the end of fall, I had an extremely high sex drive, and it was driving me crazy. And I wanted to date people and meet people, but I knew that dating apps weren't gonna really do it for me because any typical person I would meet wouldn't really satisfy my needs for that creative outlet or the passion until I really felt feelings for somebody. But then I finally met my newest partner, and uh, pretty much right away, which makes me think I'm not demisexual. Right away, I had pretty intense feelings about her. Um, that's not very common for me, but um, yeah, I'm definitely attracted to her. And our sex drive both fluctuates a lot, and it's always a complicated thing to navigate in any relationship, I think. But yeah, it always changes, I think.
And was there any impact of the HRT on your sex drive?
It's hard to tell. I feel very different in how I feel sexual desire and attraction. I enjoy touches and romance more. Although I've always been an emotional and romantic person, I think I feel significantly more romantic now and feel more of a need for emotional connection when I have sex. And I hardly ever enjoy it just for the pleasure. In fact, that's one of the least important aspects of sex for me.
I heard a lot of concerns from trans people who are thinking about doing sexual reassignment surgery, that their sex drive will change or it will completely vanish. Can you break these concerns or prove them?
I think that the largest thing that's been connected to my personal sex drive or confidence having sex is dysphoria. And when I got an orchiectomy, um, I felt a lot better. I felt less dysphoric, so my sex drive went up. My doctor told me that when I get my gonads removed, that I'm not going to possibly be able to get erections anymore. And I've noticed that I get way more now. Like I feel a lot better, so I get turned on easier. Um, and it's been 6 years almost now, and I definitely get aroused more than I did before surgery. So I don't think it's something to worry about. If anything treats your dysphoria, then do it if you're able to, if you have the means to. You might find that things are better that way. You might have more um, capacity to feel arousal or to want to have sex, and it might affect your sexual functioning, but that's something you have to consider. I don't really mind if I have issues certain times, but I haven't really found that I have. I feel very happy with the way I am.
And the last topic that we'll discuss today is politics. Before I started my social media activity, I gave myself a promise that I will never talk about politics or religion, but I already broke this promise several times because I guess we just can't ignore it. It is our
Mhm.
reality. We're living in a new regime for more than a month, and we already saw a lot of changes, and most of them are negative for our community. Can you tell about your experience during this short period?
Yeah, I mean, we could tell things were getting worse for a while. We've been a target for a little bit. States have been trying to pass legislation to restrict us from bathrooms, from healthcare, and even reverse protections on employment and housing. And now the threat is a lot more real. There's the threat that we can't renew passports. There's a threat for um, countrywide uh, transition care for all ages, and they might remove our healthcare through Medicaid, which is something a lot of us rely on. And the legislation may just get worse and worse. And it's been scaring a lot of people. A lot of my friends want to move out of the country or at least to a different state. And I get it. It's scary. I'm trying not to panic. And I think I'm succeeding in not panicking because I know what I can do and what I'm not willing to do. I don't want to leave the country. Maybe I can live somewhere better. And we are thinking about moving cities. And we're set on doing that this year. But other than that, I think the most important thing we can do is build stuff for ourselves and for our community. So I want there to be more networks. I want to do some mutual aid. I want to have the ability to help my neighbors. I think that a really important thing is to try not to be a hero. So you don't have to change the world because people want to do some grand thing and make the world a better place and then feel like they don't succeed, so they give up. But I think that in spite of how difficult things are getting, the things that have helped me the most and things that have helped my friends the most are helping somebody go to the grocery store, helping somebody with money if they need a little bit of money, or cooking a meal for them, or just listening to them talk about what they're going through, helping people find jobs, bringing food to people. Those are all very small things, it seems like, but those are the things that keep people connected.
I really like this. Don't try to be a hero.
Yeah.
But I guess a lot of people, especially in our community, they try to be heroes. They try to change the world. They try to change the society. Do you think can they succeed?
They could. I mean, I'm sure there have been plenty of people who have changed the world in big ways, big civil rights activists. have impacted millions, billions of lives, some of them. Um, we hear about Martin Luther King Jr. growing up, and but I do think that some people feel like the only way you're going to make a change is to have that kind of impact. And that's just not how that really works. I think like the civil rights movement has been so important. Uh, Liberation movements all over the world have been so important, but I think it gets conflated with this like sort of neoliberal dream that's similar to the American dream of like we can change the world, we can make the world perfect. We just have to do something. I don't know what it is, but people think that they can just do a thing and the world's better and they realize it doesn't work like that. But if you think about it, one person impacting a million lives is great, but a million people impacting 10 lives apiece, that's more than the one person could do. Like if we all do something small, then we can change the world so much. If we build communities and interdependence, then just by doing a little bit, if we all do a little bit, that'll be so much more than a couple heroes saving the world. And I think that we shouldn't try to be that person that saves the world. We should be the person that shows up for a few people that we love. And we should all do that.
I love that. I really love that. Currently, I live in Europe, and we don't have any political changes yet. But I guess we will notice them, we will feel it. And a lot of people in our local community, they're concerned about it. They're afraid. And you've also said that you don't panic and you think that you've succeeded. Are there any tips or advice that you can give how not to panic?
My approach is to stay grounded in reality. And I think that it's almost a paradox for me. It's maybe a little counterintuitive because I have BPD. I panic about stuff that isn't even a problem a lot of the time. I'll think my partner's angry at me, but there's nothing the matter at all. But when I know it's real, like this political situation right now is real, I know what's happening. I know what to look out for, and who knows what all's going to happen. But I've accepted that this is real. There's no fear of the unknown. We know what's happening. It's easier for me to accept it this way, and maybe some people relate, and maybe they don't. But I think that the best thing you can do is know what you're able to do. Um, know where we have power, know where we don't have power. Um, let me think about that a little bit. I have some notes here where I was writing about this earlier. Um, I think a lot of people need hope to be motivated. Um, and for me, I think that I have motivation no matter what. Maybe there's some hope in there, but all I know is that if I can do something to make my future go a certain way, then I'm going to do what I can right now to make the future go that way. There are paths, plenty of paths in front of us. And if I stepped on one of those paths, then that's the best way to complete that path. If I want to see a certain outcome, I have to start doing what I can right now to make it happen. And I think that panicking and being afraid can be a distraction from that. Um, we can only do what we can, and what I can right now is what I'm trying to do.
I guess it's a great advice for every single trans person. And what about the community in general? What should we
That's
do?
there's going to be a lot of difficulty, I think, with that because people have very strong opinions, and I think that we're in a situation now where people are very divided. Even within the same group of people, we're very divided. People are very sectarian and want their opinion to be the one true approach. I don't care if people agree with me or not. We have the same goal in mind. Maybe different opinions on how to get there, but let's do it all. Let's do everything we think we can do to make the world a better place and work on what we agree on. I could work with people with almost opposite political opinions for me because we both want healthcare and we both want more pay at our jobs. That's not something that we have to fight about. We agree on that. With trans people, with our community, there's a lot that we all want. There's a lot that we can work on together. And I think the most important thing is to stop arguing and to stop spending our time trying to convince people of things and just start doing things.
I love that. I love that. And I highly advocate for being united or stop arguing that there is no point in it.
Yeah,
We're just wasting our time and effort. And meanwhile, politicians do whatever they want with us.
exactly. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people think that theory is important, and theory is important, but we're not all theorists. We don't need every single person to debate what the solution is. We just need to start doing some things and not be afraid to make mistakes. Every mistake is a learning opportunity. And we know that there's so much that we all want right now, so we can take those steps. We don't have to write a manifesto or anything like that. We can just start building stuff, and a little bit at a time is more than nothing at a time.
And do you think should we have one leader or a speaker, like, for example, Martin Luther King, for our
Um,
community?
I think that having a centralized approach has its perks, and I think that if we had a leader, then if they represented us, then I wouldn't be opposed. And if we don't have one, that's fine too. I know that right now, um, having a very decentralized approach makes a lot of sense. I think that if we all do a little bit of something and we all lead each other in a way where all of our opinions matter, we don't necessarily need a spokesperson. We don't need someone to advocate for us in a big grand scale. I think that if we all do a little bit of work to achieve something, that we'll reach our goals. And I think if we had some people who had a lot of reach to advocate for us, then that would help too. I think that every different scope, every different effort we can make to fight for the world, I think is great.
And do you think are there any leaders right now in our community?
I would say so. It's kind of hard to categorize, I think. I think that there are a lot of people who have larger platforms,
Mhm.
and I would hope that they're using their platform to fight for us. And I think that there's some people that have smaller platforms and they use it to fight for us. And ultimately, I think whether you have the capacity to reach a lot of people or not, don't give up and just keep fighting. Yeah, like I'm sure we do have some spokespeople, but I almost don't feel like it's important to designate that role to anybody.
Our community had a lot of hopes on Sarah McBride in the House of Representatives. How do you find her work for our community?
Oh gosh, it's tough because of how much she has to face and how much we all have to face. There's so much systemic discrimination against us. There's a lot um, that we're up against, and anybody who's in a position to try to make a big change, I think, is doing a great thing. Um, and but people who get more attention like that are going to have more setbacks. Um, and I think that something for all of us to keep in mind is that someone in that position is going to, in a lot of cases, be made into an example in some capacity and try to, I think that people are going to try to remove our hope and our optimism through a couple examples of stopping us. But I think that we can't let that stop us. There are so many of us. We have so much capability to change the world in small ways. So I think that anybody who's doing big things to change the world is really brave. And anybody who's doing small things, you're brave too. And I think that we should just keep doing what we can in our capacity. If you have the capacity to reach a lot of people, do it if you feel safe. But even if you don't, keep it up.
Scarlett, I love that you mentioned the word hope. In my last interview, I've ended with discussing the hope for our community. Is there any?
I think there is, because I don't think that we're condemned to having nothing forever. And after every tragedy, there's always something that comes after it. Um, and we have the power to shape our future a lot more than we think we do. Um, we have a lot more power than we think we do, especially collectively. Um, I don't really think about hope the way that people think about it very much. In fact, I don't really consider hope a strategy for me. I think a lot of people do, but whether there was a path or not, I'm still going to fight. If I can conceive of a future that is better than the present, then I'm going to step down that path, whether I think it's possible or not, because it doesn't matter what I think. It matters that I do my best. Um, But I think that some people need hope, and I think that it motivates people. The only thing I think is don't let hope make you complacent. If you have something that you can do, don't hope that things get better. Just do what you can to make things better. Um, like I hope that the legislation doesn't get worse. I hope that um, the economy doesn't collapse. But um, it doesn't matter that I hope that or not. I'm going to build stuff with my community, and instead of hoping and doing nothing, I'm going to build and work together, and maybe even not worry about what I hope. I'm just going to think of the best outcome and fight for it.
Scarlett, I received a lot of comments with accusations that I ignore non-binary people, that I just close my eyes and think that they don't exist in our community. I'm so happy that I met you, Butch Transsexual, a non-binary person, and we had this honest and open talk. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and your story. I guess our community can benefit from different stories. They will understand that we're diverse. There is no one size fits all solution. We're different. Thank you
You're
so
right.
much.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm glad we got to talk about all this.
Thank you. And I hope it will be not our last talk.
I hope so too.
Thank you, Scarlett.
All right, thank you.
Okay. See you.
Bye.